Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neel C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where I'm aiming to keep you all smile with a much more positive narrative every single day during this period of uncertainty. And of course beyond, because I think we're all on this journey together, gang, and like to think that we can all be there for each other through the good and the bad times. So if any of you are feeling a little bit lonely out there, just want to speak to a friendly voice, send me an email, techblogwriter@outlook.com, or you can hop on a Zoom call with me. But one of the things that I'm keen to do on this podcast is replace those tiresome headlines of tech dystopia and look at how technology can solve some of the big problems and challenges that we're all facing right now. And more people are working from home at the moment. And I am hearing from a lot of you that are saying, Neel, I just don't know when to switch off. And I seem to find myself actually working more when I'm at home than when I'm in the office. So I thought it'd be a great opportunity to tackle that particular problem head on, all based on the kind of emails that I'm getting from you. So I invited Roger Neel onto the podcast today, and he's the co-founder and CTO of a company called Mavenlink. And for over 11 years, he is an accomplished web designer, Ruby on Rails engineer, thought leader in agile software development, mentor to startup founders and software developers, and a strong advocate for pair programming. But I invited him on the podcast today to speak about the topic of burnout. And Roger states that one of the major factors that contribute to overwhelmed staff members is a lack of focus, of vision from the management teams that often result in too many conflicting projects and priorities. And he said, for example, if you give someone 20 tasks and say they're all critical, they're going to be overwhelmed. Instead, you're more focused and do a better job prioritising. But maybe there's an alternate way. What if instead you're focused and do a better job prioritising? People are less likely to wind up overwhelmed with their task list. So let's explore that topic today. So with all those planes grounded all over the world, let's go on a virtual trip to San Francisco so we can speak with Roger Neel, co-founder and CTO of Mavenlink. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Hey, Neel. Thanks for having me on the show. My name's Roger Neel. I'm co-founder and CTO of Mavenlink. I direct our technology, product, and engineering decisions. And really, as of late, I've been focused on emerging technologies and capabilities for our future growth.
Now, I did speak with Ray Granger from Mavenlink. I think it was back in 2017, but I do suspect we've got a few more listeners since that podcast. So can you remind the listeners a little about the kind of problems that you solve with technology for businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. So Ray Granger is our CEO and my co-founder. And so Mavenlink is really focused on disrupting a very large $3 trillion services industry with our technology. And really, we're providing a new way to work remotely and across business boundaries. So, services organizations, i.e. professional services organizations that we serve, leverage a lot of different solutions and software. And, typically they have a lot of information silos due to that. So that makes really running their businesses pretty challenging. They're staffing projects, they're, pushing people all over the world, at least traditionally, not necessarily in the last few weeks. And, they're challenged because there's no real single source of truth. So we really help them establish an operational system of record that serves as that source of truth. So we bring together some of their main processes like resource management, project management, collaboration, and business intelligence or reporting into just one common system. So that's a little bit about what we do.
And everything is evolving before our eyes at the moment, some for the better and obviously a lot for the worse at the moment. So I'm curious, though, if we were to go back in time, how much has your relationship with Ray and also your vision for Mavenlink, how much has that evolved over the years, would you say?
Oh man, it's I could go on and on for a few episodes here, but really, when we started out and when we set out, we really did want to focus on the services industry. So from that perspective, not a whole lot has changed. We knew that we wanted to build a software as a service technology platform to serve the industry. Traditionally, when you look way back 15, 20, even 30 years, there was really no software for that industry because you had these distributed teams. Traditional IT was a lot behind the firewall and whatnot. Difficult to work remotely, difficult to work, on client sites with your clients when you had your technology back home. But with the advent of cloud and SaaS, we really saw a real opportunity to serve the market and to serve. We started with freelancers, we moved up market, and now we're serving some really large global enterprises. So really, from that perspective, it's changed. Serving these large agencies and clients that we've got. We also, Neel, set out with a vision to really help disrupt how people staff within the industry. So what that means is, a lot of folks are staffing their projects. They might not have all the resources to bring to bear. And, they really need channels to go find subcontractors and other folks to staff those projects, with the real expertise that they may need to deliver for their client. And so that's really what Mavenlink is evolving to. And, I think that was part of our initial vision, and we're really coming back around to it now.
And so much is changing at the moment. If we look at remote working, for example, go back a couple of months ago, yes, there were people working from home once a week. But on the grand scheme of things, that was like a handful of people compared to the entire workforce across the world. But there are now people working at home at scale at the moment. And many people will just be unable to switch off and tend to overcompensate. So that was one of the reasons I was excited to get you on the podcast today. So can you tell me a little bit more about the topic of burnout and why we need to talk about it? And I suspect as someone that's been a co-founder of a company and worked all the hours that you can imagine, you're more than familiar with this topic. But can you share what your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'm sitting here nodding, which isn't a very good format for podcasts, but aren't these really interesting times? Yeah. I'm very proud of our own company and many of our clients and the companies we work with, both in the U.S., the U.K., and otherwise globally, for moving with such speed in these interesting times. But really, to your point. There's a lot of tech that's out there. I was reflecting a couple weeks ago when really this all first started. Imagine having to do this 15 years ago, and not really having video chat and some of the collaboration technologies that we all use day to day. But really, what hasn't changed between, call it 15 years ago and now, is exactly what you bring up, and that's burnout. For those folks who have been working remotely for a long time, they'll remind all of us, hey, make sure you take a shower in the morning and quote unquote, get yourself into the office, dressed and ready to go, and not just treat it as kind of one big workspace. But, I think a lot of people are struggling with that right now. Certainly we've done company retrospectives and talked with our clients and companies that use Mavenlink. And, what I've started to kind of find is the workforce is experiencing what I might call a calendar without boundaries. And I'm certainly feeling it. So, you start early in the morning, you kind of go back to back. And I think one of the fundamental things that's happening right now with burnout is where it was once easy to tap a colleague on the shoulder, run into them in the hallway, have a few minute chat just while you're kind of milling around the office, which actually does advance things that you might need to do, has now become what we all dread, which is, the 30-minute meeting, the 60-minute meeting. We got to get together. And so, one of the things we're doing to combat that a little bit is just make sure everyone's aware of their calendar, and also schedule what we're calling, and somebody else can take their own word for it. We're calling it Maven time, where everyone knows that we have unschedulable time for whatever reason. Could be you're a parent with a child at home now. Could be you want to get in a walk, something like that. And you've had 4 hours of continuous meetings. You need that time for yourself, and really kind of spread things out.
And of course, all the shops and restaurants are closed and everyone's urged to stay indoors, and that's happening all over the world. So naturally, many people are just going to immerse themselves in their work, and quickly that will become very normal to them. But what symptoms should people look for when it comes to burnout? Because it's something that I think can just sneak up on you from nowhere, can't it?
It really can. And, I think it's up to, good managers and really company leadership to just remind everyone that it's a marathon and not a sprint. When we really look at our own workforce and we look at the clients we serve, we're able to kind of see in the platform, and certainly our users are able to see for themselves, where they're falling behind on deliverables. And so, if you start seeing a lot of overdue tasks, perhaps projects that are falling behind, this is certainly, there's kind of a general message here where that's something to look for. But certainly, as we're talking about kind of the interesting times we're living in right now, that's something also to be aware of. There are people with certain situations at home that really need consideration when we're talking about the work and the output that we might expect. And so, as people have their one-on-ones with managers, and they're talking about being overwhelmed, that's something to really kind of keep an eye on, and also maybe aggregate that to a degree where, if we get together as managers and we say, oh man, I'm hearing this over and over in my one-on-ones, that's something to look at collectively. I think also, Neel, communication is a pretty major concern, as workforces are, getting more distributed, even culturally, but then also in our times now. So, if you're seeing miscommunications happening or people being a little bit snippy, that can all, those can all be kind of symptoms of people being a bit overwhelmed.
And apologies in advance, because this is a pretty big question, but rather than battling too many conflicting projects and priorities, and let's face it, we've all been there, what do you think the secret to getting the right balance of focus and vision from management teams actually is? Because again, it's a hard balance to reach, isn't it?
It really is. And, there's obviously no silver bullet here, but, what I try to subscribe to and what I urge my teams to do too is really regularly collaborate, and look at conflicting projects and priorities, and really, try to figure out what's critical and what's not, and, what can be pushed out for later. One of the things that we really try to focus on is not having too much work in progress going at any given time. So yes, all these things are really important. We might have 10 projects that we really want to get done this year. But as we all know, even in our own personal lives, if you try to tackle all 10 at once, you might not make the progress you want to make on all 10. Whereas if you just spread them out, maybe 3 at a time, you're going to breeze through the year and get them all done. So kind of limiting that work in progress is probably our biggest tactic and technique. And then really kind of balancing that with, making sure, back to burnout, that people are working a healthy work-life balance. And that really has to come from the top down, and from management, where, people are setting guidelines, and we kind of focus on the real tasks at hand right now. And then, move on to the next thing once we get it done.
And we are living in a period of uncertainty at the moment, but I want to try and use this time to create a different narrative and dig deep on this podcast to try and learn from others who have risen to challenges and overcome obstacles in the past to try and inspire people. So as a co-founder and CTO of Mavenlink for over 11 years and an accomplished web designer, Ruby on Rails engineer, mentor to startup founders and software developers, I've got to ask, what are some key challenges that you faced early on in your career, and how did you approach them, overcome them, and ultimately beat them?
It's a great question. There's a lot here we could certainly talk about. But one of the things on my mind as it relates to this is, really as we look at some of the topics we just talked about, burnout, limiting work in progress, making sure that we're focused on key outcomes. Measurement is something that I think people are always challenged with. So, for me as an engineer by trade and member of a technology organization, I report up to our board and obviously even Ray and our CEO. What value are we delivering for our clients? How can we demonstrate the advancements we're making? Are really adding value to the clients that we serve. And there's not always necessarily a straightforward correlation between the work that we do and, how the balance sheet looks. And this goes for everybody. You can be an individual contributor in a business, who's, working on something, pretty focused. And, how did that really kind of lead to an outcome? Once you've got it done, did you do it quickly enough? Did you do it correctly? Is the client happy with the work? Is your boss happy with the work? Did it help the company? And so really, one thing that I've been focused on, over the last couple of years, and a challenge that, I've been facing is really, how do you provide better measurement for, a product delivery engineering organization, to really show that, we're adding value to the company, not obviously not just a cost center. And, as the company grows its revenue, that's really kind of product led.
So with more and more businesses increasing the ability for staff to work remotely now, I've got to ask, how is Mavenlink improving collaboration during this period?
Yeah, we often talk about Mavenlink as a new system to the market. In the scheme of things, obviously we've been around for 11 years, but we took a very different perspective from the get-go. We talk about Mavenlink having collaboration at the core. So, obviously I think that mantra might be pretty pertinent to this question. What we mean by that is, traditionally systems like ours, where people are tracking time, they're tracking their work, they're staffing their projects. Traditionally, systems like ours have been back office. And what that means is, it's a back office system that doesn't really see the light of day with clients. Mavenlink really took a different perspective where, we actually encourage our users to bring their clients into the system. What we saw was a world where business boundaries were kind of much decreased. And, if I'm working with you, Neel, why not work in the same system? And, now we're working together. We're able to have conversations like these. We're able to manage our project together, whatever it is, rather than, me going and working in my system and then, sending you an email. and now it's drowned out with all the other activities that you've got going. So, as we look at remote workers now, where traditionally they might have been traveling to client sites, and maybe decrease the need for some of that client collaboration because they're just sitting in a conference room or office together. Now with the world as it is, and the even more distributed nature of the workforce, the capabilities we've got there are even more valuable, and we're really encouraging people to make sure that they've got their entire team invited into their project so that they're working together, and that's really how we're kind of focused on improving collaboration.
There's some great points there as well, because I do think when we do reach the other side of this global pandemic, it almost feels like the way that we work has changed forever. And I think there's a lot of people sat at home now thinking, well, I don't need to make those business trips, and I don't need those daily meetings or a day just full of back-to-back meetings. But how do you see the world of project management evolving?
Yeah, I think pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and post-pandemic, to your point, we've really seen that we're in the midst of a huge challenge for a lot of organizations. The war for talent is much higher than it's ever been. We've just had a great global job market, with very low unemployment, really across the board. And so now people have really tapped into the distributed workforce. You might be living in the UK, and maybe your editor is in Hungary, or they're in New York or something like that. And why not? You don't necessarily need a UK based editor for your podcast. So I think projects are awfully similar. As we look at project management, projects are often made up of one or more humans with different skills, and often very specialized skills that they need to bring to bear. So, when we look at kind of how that's distributed, how do we keep people on the same page, understanding the status? And, for better or worse, this period of uncertainty and change, I think is going to make a lasting impact. I think people are really going to learn from it, where it's so important to communicate. It's important to keep in mind some security concerns. We're seeing what's happening with Zoom a little bit, and some of the laser focus on them. We're seeing training and onboarding. How do we do remote interviews? How do we do remote hiring and then onboarding? And so all of these things lead to the staffing requirements of projects. So maybe the project itself hasn't changed much, but kind of the inputs into it are just very different.
And it really does feel like we're upgrading our mindset and making it fit for a digital world. And of course, on the horizon, there's a whole heap of emerging technologies coming as well. So what excites you about these emerging technologies, and how they could actually help Mavenlink continuously improve and adapt to these new surroundings too?
Yeah, great question. I always have this on my mind. It's been said so many times before, but the only constant in technology is change. Yeah. So, as we see all this emerging technology coming out, I think a lot of what's emerged lately in cloud computing and software as a service and everything like that is still really only in its infancy. At Mavenlink, we feel like we've always been on the cutting edge of a very modern technology stack. We started with some pretty cutting edge stuff in 2008, 2009. And it's amazing to look back at what we were doing 11 years ago. Some of the things are the same. As you mentioned, Ruby on Rails. We've got a lot of the same stack on the back end. But then so much is different. How we deploy our software, how we really, use front-end technology to create just great user experiences. But, one of the things that we're experimenting with a lot right now, and I think this goes for probably a lot of your listeners and technology companies, is, one, distributed and modern workflow. So, because we tie in with a lot of different systems, we do a lot of integration and business process automation. And so for me, this distributed tech is really taking advantage of a modern Kubernetes infrastructure, not to get too technical, but really kind of containerization of tech, and being able to have purpose-built systems for different workflow that businesses require. And then maybe on the other hand, we're working on a lot of different algorithmic intelligence, if you will, for better business planning. Some people might really kind of push for machine learning there, AI, but we're actually doing it the old-fashioned way with kind of good old-fashioned algorithms that my computer science professors taught me. But now with modern computing power, we're able to really scale those algorithms and use them at speed and do some really cool work with simulations, almost like Deep Blue might do for chess. We're able to do with resource management. So things like that, I just think kind of the cloud itself, as much as it's talked about, it's almost like understood, where there's just so much more capability there that we have at our fingertips, and just so much we can do with it.
Absolutely. And I'd love to get you back on in a few months and talk about some of those capabilities in a little bit more detail.
That'd be fun.
But before I do let you go and rush off, because I know you're an incredibly busy guy, can I just ask that you remind everyone listening of where they can find Mavenlink online, and also the best way of contacting your team if anyone's left with any questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So couple things. One, obviously, mavenlink.com. You can also find me at Maven Roger on Twitter. I used to be very active. I'm a little bit less active. It's something that fell off the list, but I'm always up for a good DM or a good conversation. You can email our team at info@mavenlink.com. You can also find me. I'm one of the Forbes Tech Council members. So probably just Google Forbes Tech Council, Roger Neel. And, love to connect again, Neel, and love to connect with your audience as well.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you today, Roger. And yes, learning about how we're all working remotely and how Mavenlink is improving collaboration, but also looking out for those symptoms of burnout, because I think it is a critical thing to look out for at the moment. I think we're all a little bit distracted looking at other things, but something like that can sneak up on us when we least expect it. So I'd love to have another chat with you in a few months on the other side of this, and we'll explore some of those tech topics too. But a big thank you, Roger, for taking the time to chat with me today.
That'd be great. Thanks for having me on today, Neel.
I remember from my first conversation with Mavenlink that it was the only solution that helps services, firms, and helps them establish an operational system of record that facilitates their business lifecycle. I still remember from our first conversation that Mavenlink is one of the only solutions out there, if not the only one, that helps service firms establish that operational system of record that facilitates their business lifecycle. And by that, I'm including key capabilities like resource management, project management, collaboration, project accounting, and business intelligence. But this time around, the topic of burnout and knowing what to look out for is a topic that I'm thrilled that we managed to focus on today. And anyone that follows my tech articles online will know that I recently wrote an article after speaking with Daniel Burrus a few weeks ago that businesses should not be selling now. They should be being significant to people when they need it most. And if you become significant in people's lives, in your customers' lives, it will lead to success at a later date. But I just cannot thank Roger enough for taking the time to come on here and give a little bit back and talking about this crucial topic, which is even more important right now. But hey, please share your thoughts, opinions, expertise, questions, whatever it is. Email me techblogwriter@outlook.com, tweet me at Neel C. Hughes, and go to my website techblogwriter.co.uk. If you'd like to browse through 1,200 podcast episodes, work with me, or find out details about my new book, which is out on May the 5th. Other than that, I'll be back tomorrow bright and early, and I'll hopefully see you all there. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neel C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.